Hello, all, and welcome to Murder at the Round Table. My name is Raf, and I'm joined today again by my awesome co-hosts, Ibsha Neha.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So before we start off, if you like what you're hearing today and you want to join the murder again, to hear us discuss cases or sometimes just vibe or do continuous parts of conversations, then please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow on whatever platform you're on. And yeah, so on today's unedited episode, we will be continuing with part two of the Are We Part of the Problem discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, discussion that was so riveting last time that we're like, you know what, this needs
This
more
needs a part
context.
two.
Yeah. Trigger warning to this is just murder mostly. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much all where we talk about. You know, it's in the name. And if you haven't listened to part one yet, I would suggest starting off with part one and then coming back to this. But yeah, so let's jump back in. So last
Mm-hmm.
time we talked about the aspects of the ethical nature of true crime, like with a
Right.
focus on like sensationalism, desensitization, and victim exploitation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of to continue that discussion, we'll just jump on to the next criticism, our next item on the list, which is misleading narratives.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this case, or the argument here, is that some true crime podcasts may present biased or inaccurate information, and that leads to misconceptions about criminal cases, the justice system, or mental health issues. Um, I can start off responding to it, and then we can build from there.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
so for this point, I do agree with it
Mm-hmm.
in when it comes to the whole like presenting biased and like biased points of views and how that shapes how the story you know
Mm-hmm.
is received and such. But I would also argue that many more podcasts just want to present facts. And if we are going to start bringing in bias in general, like that's just inbuilt
Mm-hmm.
in any media correspondence, regardless. So, like if you take the news, for example, depending on what political leaning of a station or newsprint or whatever, it affects how they present the story. So, having the bias isn't the issue, it's more just making sure your facts are consistent. And I think most podcasts try to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Right?
just want to add we have like Neha doing like a get ready with me at the back
Yeah,
with
this should be
doing her hair. She
this
just got
this
out
should
of the
be a
shower.
video.
Trying to multitask, y'all.
Um
Thank God for the mute button.
Well, the thing is, even if you were
Mhm.
recording, because I had a coughing fit during the first part, I was able to mute my coughing out. Um, so yeah, that is doable. Just more work on my end. That's all. Um, yeah, no, I agree with you. And the thing that we're very lucky to have is that I'm not saying lucky as in us, but in general, is that we have so many podcasts that are just news and information related. So as
Mhm.
things happen, it just gets pushed out if it's a recent thing. Yeah, there's still a bias. People hold bias based off, what they want out of the information that they're saying. So like I know like news basically they'll tell you certain details to get more attention to their channel and whatnot. So like that's what I'm kind of saying. Same with like true crime podcasts as well. Like they'll just tell you details just to get attention and leave out certain things.
Mhm.
But I also think there's podcasts that they're not journalists or professionals in the field that will do a thorough research. maybe they'll leave out details of like gory details, or maybe victim stories that they find a little bit too graphic for their content. But yeah, they're trying to do the full thing, and then they're coming to discuss it just like we do. So I think we're lucky in that aspect because we get a bit of both. Sometimes when I listen to a podcast and I'm like, I feel like there's something missing, I'll listen to
Yeah.
the same story on another podcast to see if they have those missing its and bits included. Um, so yeah, I do think there's certain podcasts that have information missing, whether it's on purpose, whether it's to benefit their channel and their content, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it's nice to have like multiple podcasts and multiple media formats that share the same information so you can see what information is missing, but it's still available to people. I hope that answers the question. Everybody's just multitasking today. Okay.
No, no,
Raph just
no.
rolls back into frame.
I was present. I was listening very, very attentively. I was just making sure we were not disrupted. Yes. Okay. Anyways.
Yeah, that was my point. I hope I covered everything.
No, I would think so. Now, any follow up?
No, nothing more that I can add. I do agree with everything Ipsha said, that we're very blessed to have access to a lot of other forms of media, and like for news and like updates that we can access without relying on just straight news or like these websites, especially because
Hmm.
with like law changes in Canada, right? When we look at the different bills and everything, like how we don't get news on our social medias anymore. Like I think that was a huge way that people relied on it. So
Hmm.
having to pivot from that really was it was like hard, but I feel like it was better because you got depends on the source you're seeking out to though. So it
Hmm.
comes back to the people that, you kind of fall into confirmation bias. Like you seek out the information that confirms what you believe in rather than the whole picture. But I agree with
Yeah.
everything Ipsha said.
All right. And that kind of connects back to uh, our discussion on sensationalism. Oh man, words today. Last time,
Hmm.
and how it is very like audience based in
Hmm.
terms of like
Yeah.
how they end up receiving it, which I guess kind of brings us to our next one,
Hmm.
um, glorifying criminals, which we touched a
Hmm.
little bit upon last time. So on this note, the criticism is by focusing on the lives and exploits of criminals, you can inadvertently, glamorize their actions and potentially inspire like copycat behavior or romanticize crime,
Hmm.
essentially. And I guess an example of this might be in the way that people were obsessed with, like Ted Bundy,
Hmm.
both the actual man and also like from the Netflix documentary too. But
Hmm.
I think we mentioned that last time that that was only really because he was being played by Zac Efron. But anyways, yeah, yeah. So glorifying criminals. What do we think?
Um, so yeah, I recently, actually, this past few weeks, I've been working in the office and had some time to listen to some podcasts, and I was very like careful and trying to pick up like what kind of like the things that we've talked about in the first part of ethics, and like how they're trying to give back to the victims and their families, and how they're telling the stories. And I
Hmm.
realized like a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, the focus, if possible, I know like a lot of crimes and stories that we listen to happen so far back that the stories are kind of lost in terms of the victims. We only can go off of what the criminal did.
Yeah.
But I realized a lot of the podcast not only focuses on what happened, like the timeline events, but they also focus on a little bit of the victim story if possible. And I think that focus is really nice to have. Um, and then, yeah, obviously they talk about, if it's like a serial killer, Ted Bundy, they'll talk about how that person was raised and what they did, but they talk a little bit about the victims too. And I think you can see like it's like, oh, if you are whatever attracted to the crime or whatever the offender did,
Hmm.
you can also see what the other side of things are and kind of understand what the victim was going through and what their life was like before whatever happened.
Yeah.
And I think I really appreciated a lot of the podcasts doing that. It's just not like direct information. It's kind of like a story. You kind of see both sides of things. So yeah, I think I appreciate podcasts when they do that. The storytelling. It doesn't quite glamorize the offender so much. In fact, I think it kind of makes them look bad in many ways. But
Yeah.
again, it just depends on who the narrator is. But regardless, it also depends on who's listening. The person who's listening, they will pick up what they want to pick up. Um, like I said, I was trying to pick up what the hosts were saying and how they were giving back. That was my focus. Someone's focus could be like what the crime is and how they can learn more criminal activity um, from from the podcast, I guess.
How they can like avoid being caught if they were ever to do the same thing, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to what you said about being able to see how they grew up and got to that point.
Hmm.
Like, I think that's really important, being able to see that timeline, because when you're discussing why somebody did something, you need to understand how they grew up, what happened to them, their
Hmm.
everyday life, because that tells you, as a public, hey, maybe this is something to think about, you know?
Hmm.
Um, maybe it's happening within your own life or with people around you, the way their lives are, their situations that they're in that you may not be aware of, and this is what it can lead to if it's something you ignore, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I would argue too that by the logic of glorifying crime or romanticizing it or whatever, um, podcasters should be at the top of the list as copycat criminals. The
Yeah.
like the amount of research and just I'll say slight obsession that
Oh, 100%.
I think we have when it comes to these stories and trying to like dissect them. We should be at the top of the list of like we're going to be like the next ones committing it, and I don't really see that unless somebody knows something I don't know. But
I
yeah,
mean, have there been any stories about someone who was like a killer and the podcasting was their hobby or it was a part of their career?
I've been trying
Yet?
to
Have
find
we come
something.
across that yet?
Um,
No.
I think,
Hey, who
Maybe they're
knows?
just
Maybe.
too good. They don't get
Actually, you
caught.
know what? That's a good point. They are a podcaster, and that makes them so good they cannot be caught.
uh, I wanted to mention something, but it's it's so lost in my head right now. I can't find it. Um, no, but I think I mentioned this person. I forget their full name, but yeah, they wanted to create a movie that involves serial killing, and they started to like kill people in the same manner they were writing the story.
Mm.
Mhm.
Um,
I
yeah,
Some intense
remember
method
this.
acting.
method acting. Yeah, so
I do
um,
remember that. I just who was that?
I know the first Mark Twitchell. Mark Twitchell,
Twitch.
serial
Huh.
killer in Alberta.
Oh, Canadian filmmaker convicted of first-degree murder in April 2011. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, we'll deep dive into
Ins
that one at some point.
Inspired by the fictional character Dexter Morgan.
and also um not podcast really, but
Hmm.
Slenderman. People got inspired by Slenderman and started killing.
Right. Yeah.
That was huge when I was in junior high.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
Same.
remember.
I mean, just not podcast. People get inspired by the weirdest things.
By
You know,
anything.
here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's coming back to me. I found it in my brain. Um,
Yay.
the thing about being able, like, uh not so much like the podcast about true crime that are journalist formats, like news formats that just give out information, more about like more of like the podcasts that have like two hosts, three hosts, four hosts, like discussing it. The thing I appreciate about that kind of format is the ability to talk about something. Um, uh, so like let's say I for the first time I found out about Slenderman, it allows me to talk about it, get any questions, any fears, any concerns out. And then when you talk about it amongst the group, you're kind of discussing it and it kind of normalizes it in a way that you're no longer afraid of that, whatever it might be, Slenderman or whatever.
Hmm.
And I think in a way, yes, there's this aspect of like glorifying whatever it is, but there's also this
Mhm.
thing about like it could be something about that I had no clue about, but being able to talk about it just makes me feel a little bit better. Scott kind of like makes sense.
Yeah. Um,
Not like better, like, oh my God, this is like the most normal thing. It's just like my mind is a little bit settled. I'm not afraid of it. Like I can talk
mhm.
about it furthermore, like whether it be research and stuff like that. I understand like there's probably hundreds of people who might have like a different effect, but to me, like going back to the Slender Man thing, if somebody was so concerned about it, having a friend, a therapist, podcast, or whatever to talk about it would just like would no longer feel, I think, afraid of that thing at the end of the day. If
It, yeah, it
I see what
humanizes
you're
it,
saying. Yeah.
yeah.
and like it's kind of like when a very simple example of like being afraid of the dark
Hmm.
as a kid, and the more you grow up, you learn more. It's like, oh, there's actually nothing there. There's
Yeah,
nothing under the bed. There's nothing in the closet.
that we know of.
Over the years, have I still checked now and again? Yes,
Yeah.
but
What's
I
sneaking
for the
down
most
there?
part, like 95% certain we're all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
95%. The 5% we don't know. Most.
There's
You gotta
always
leave
room
a
for
little.
error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta leave a little room, little mystery.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, like in certain ways it's like, oh yeah, we're normalizing this thing, we're like glorifying these things, these horrible things. But I think the people who do talk about it, it's kind of benefits them in a way
Hmm.
that they feel a little bit better, talking to each other and stuff like that. So I kind of appreciate true crime documentaries, podcasts actually,
Hmm.
or like videos uh, in that aspect.
Nice.
When
Neha,
mhm.
how you vibing? What you thinking?
I'm vibing great. I was just thinking about this like Slender Man because I remember when like the challenges came out online and then people would be getting bullied and like cyber harassed. And then the therapy for these people had to change, right? Like you couldn't approach it the way you normally approached it because this was something that wasn't real, but it was
Hmm.
awakening something other in people that was really real, and it was like bringing certain fears or other feelings to the forefront that maybe people were suppressing or they didn't know they
Mhm.
had, right? And so the
Yeah.
approach to helping people that had this fear, like now you look out there's hundreds of articles because we're like how many years down the road from this, but somewhere there probably is someone that's still afraid of Slenderman or believes in it
Mhm.
very, very deeply, right? And so, like, the way therapy has changed for that was really interesting because that opened up, it was like uncharted territory, but it also opened up the doors for education on so many levels.
Mhm.
And like now you look at it and there's like, um, not just like therapy with psychedelics, but also like that therapy that includes like using other items such as like tarot or astrology or, because there are people that it it helps them when these like when these topics are or when these are incorporated into helping them heal. Like I remember one time my friend Googled, because she was scared of Slenderman. She's like, how do I protect myself against him? And one thing that came up was know that you could take him, even though he's 7 feet tall, but he's very skinny. Literally just run between the
Know that you
legs.
could take him.
as
Oh, I
as
love
someone in
that.
grade 7 who's like 4.4.5 feet tall, just run between his legs.
Just grab his leg and yonk it. What is he gonna do?
Ifsha could still run between his legs.
Yeah, 100%. I could just
Oh,
like
jeez.
just his legs and just go in like a figure 8 around his legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in and
Yeah.
out, in and out. Like, what is he
You
gonna
could
do?
just,
Run.
yeah, you could just tackle him. Yeah.
Run in a zigzag motion like they say to do when you're being chased by, I think, an alligator,
Yeah,
because it takes them too much to move their body around, and it's easier for them to run in a straight line.
run
Maybe
towards like
Slenderman is the same thing.
run towards a tree with a lot of branches sticking out and lower branches too. Two things. I remember when like Slenderman first came out, I had to have a friend like tell me like what the fuck was going on because I was so scared to search it for my own.
Was
So
that friend Raph?
no,
No.
no. It was a different friend. I don't think like this friend. We didn't really talk like regularly. She just happened to be online on Facebook, and I'm like, "Hey, can you do me a favor?"
Is this someone I know?
No, this used to be like a old neighbor back when I was in elementary. Um,
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
but yeah, she did the research. She's like, "No, you're all fine. This is just a story somebody came up with."
Aw.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Okay, thank you, bye." But the other thing is like, yes, so the thing about with the Slenderman stuff, not only did it change how the therapy process works for a lot of people, it also changed how storytelling. Um, a podcast actually talks about this: how we tell stories, how we tell narratives, especially the ones that are a little bit scarier on the internet.
Mhm.
um, because the person who actually came up the story of Slenderman and posted it, they never realized that how big it was going to be and how it would be perceived. They didn't think about that it was going to be like challenges, people doing all these things, committing crimes under the name of Slenderman. He's like, this was just a scary story I posted because there are people on the internet that like scary stories and creepy pastas and whatnot. And they didn't even fathom that this was going to happen. So it really changed how people who are like posting gory contents. And I think like then there was this thing about like trigger warnings, caution messages at the beginning of the videos, and how that started to pop up on videos more often,
Mhm.
especially like mainstream media, like YouTube videos and stuff. So it changed a lot of things. And yeah, it makes you think like, had this not happened, what like where were things going? Like therapy would be like the basic form of therapy. Media would be like old school media, and yeah, we wouldn't have a lot of things that we do in terms of media that we do now.
So do you guys
Abs-
think, I mean, not to make this Slenderman focused like episode, but
We've been
do you
talking about
guys
I was
Slenderman for
gonna
like
do you
say
guys
we were talking about glorifying criminals, and then we made our way to
do you guys
Slenderman.
do you guys think the way that like Slenderman took off and became like also like sensationalized, right? Do you think it was
Mhm.
because of people who were just like opportunistic about it? Because you know how there's always like people out there that like predators or like things like that, right? Like they always want, there's always this hidden industry that we don't talk about
Mhm.
or that we don't really know that much about. Do you think like the way it took off and how popular it became, it was like in part the hand of people like this or the industry that of like like sex trafficking or child trafficking, like that as well, that kind of push this, like, you know, because like I remember there was like all these challenges involving Slenderman, or like stay awake at night and like, or do this or kill this person, or like I dare you to drink this like weird combo of bleach and whatever, and then
Yeah.
you'll be saved from Slenderman. Like, you know, do you guys think it like a big push of this was from that, or it was just one person posted and it just so
Uh,
happened to take off? Not just as this is a natural way it just happened.
I I would say that that makes a lot of sense
Mm-hmm.
because you have this like in general as a public we have oh yeah, look at me speaking for the whole public, but we have a craving for the weird, the mysterious, the hidden, urban legends, eldritch
Mm-hmm.
horrors, all that stuff. And you have a story that comes up that feels just creepy enough to stick in your mind, but also just close enough that you're like, wait, is it real? Is it not? Somebody takes advantage of that and starts saying, hey, you should do all these things to avoid it, which just feeds into its growth. Because now it's like, wait, you're coming up with all of these counters for this thing that's not real. Is it real? And most people are going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
well, no, like obviously not. But kids, well, you'll latch on to things pretty quickly, because yeah, same thing. There was a period of time when I first heard about Slenderman that at night I walked a little bit faster. Like, as far as I was concerned, I was like, this thing's not real. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, my
There's a
steps
fear
would be
inside.
would move a little bit faster to get home.
Yeah.
And I would also avoid like seeing him on my screen because I'm like, oh, he's gonna jump out of it or something.
Right.
Um,
Just
so
out of the
I
screen, stick its hand out and grab you.
exactly very
Shake your
like
hand. Hello.
very like
Hello.
The Ring, was
Nasty.
it? Yeah,
Yeah.
the Ring, yeah. So I guess yeah, to answer the question, yes, people definitely took advantage of that, and unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
that made it like grow even more. And in many cases, that happens.
I don't think the story was created for the purpose of like that,
Hmm.
but there were,
Yeah.
I would say, like stupid people, probably like, people who are bored that made a challenge.
Hmm.
Um, in a period of time where you don't like now you see like, oh, TikTok challenge, and it's going to be fun, it's going to be stupid, you don't have to do it, but this came in a time where that wasn't a thing, and I
Yeah.
think there was a lot of like peer pressure involved. So it's like, oh, you're not going to do this challenge, oh, you're stupid, you're a loser, you're this, you're that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Very
And
FOMO.
yeah, and I think that's what took it off. Yes, there is a fear. um you have, like Graf said, that is a thing with urban legends. Like, no matter what, I know I've heard many urban legends, but if I listen to it again, it just creates this uneasiness inside still to this point. I don't know why. It could be the eerie music that comes with the video or the short clip, but
Hmm.
that stays. And over top of that, it's like constant bullying and stuff, and I don't know what is going on. Yeah, that could factor into why some certain young people fall prey to these challenges, I guess.
Yeah. Um. Alrighty. I say we move on to the next guy.
Slenderman.
Yeah, you know what? I'm starting to feel those like old feelings again. So yeah, we should move on.
Oh yeah.
All jokes. It's all jokes, I promise, mostly. Okay, so the next point was on public misconceptions.
Hmm.
Um, so the argument being that podcasts can contribute to public misunderstandings about crime rates and the criminal justice system, and potentially influence policy and societal attitudes based on sensationalized accounts.
Hmm.
I When I came across this, I was like, I've never thought about this before. And I kind of talked about it a little bit last time, but that was like after we finished recording. Because this is one point that I'm just like, are you serious? The reason is the more popular true crime is as a genre,
Hmm.
the more people are affected, and by extension, society and the laws that govern it, right?
Hmm.
When the public hears a story of, okay, in this case, the police acted this way,
Yeah.
or the justice system failed this family and this victim in this way, and this was a consequence, well, now you have motivation to fix it
Yeah.
so that you don't have another case like this again. So there is no other true crime podcast where they're covering, hey, this happened back in the 80s and it happened again in 2000, you know? We
Mm-hmm.
want less of that. So yeah, that's honestly that's pretty much it with this. Like, sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I understand the like misconception part of it
Yeah.
because maybe if there is a public case that's going on and a lot of people have been hearing about through podcasts or through true crime documentaries, whatever, about how the police are not doing their job or how the justice system isn't working. Okay, then you end up creating this feeling of like resentment within the public or a distrust of society's like laws and governance and whatever. Sure, you could argue that. So like I can see the point, but I would just say that the positives, would outweigh that. But I don't know. What do y'all think?
Yeah, do you want to go first?
I'm actually gonna ask Rap to repeat it a little bit because I lost
Oh,
track.
that's okay. I just kind of went out in there. Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
no, it's all good. So the main criticism is about how these podcasts are contributing to the public's, in this case, they're saying misunderstanding
Hmm.
about crime rates, about our justice system, and how that ends up affecting policy and societal attitudes. So like affecting like real change or action that's going on for
Right,
the
like,
for the better or for the worse,
and the worst. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think, like with anything, the way we look at it, when we sometimes public opinion plays too much of a role, especially
Hmm.
when you look at it going in the wrong direction. And
Hmm.
then you wonder which public's opinion are they considering and which part of the public are they not? Um,
Yeah.
obviously, like there are good examples because when we look at in Canada, I think it's Amanda Todd, like when she was being bullied, right? Like to what extent did that really go? And then afterwards, like how many years later, like were like I think it was her family, but also other advocacy groups that were pushing for law changes with like I think it was with internet, right? Like internet access and restrictions. So I think something
Hmm.
like with
Yeah.
that. I think like, but how many years did it take for those people to keep pushing and to when it came into effect and rose up the ranks to finally become some sort of like legislation, right? But
Hmm.
it is good. It's just I think I'm not saying like rush it in like 1 to 2 years of when an event happens to when something becomes legislation, but when you are looking at protect and in that time when you look at from when this incident happened to when legislation came into place with just for Amanda Todd as an example, um how many other events happened in between, how many worse things happened in between. I'm not saying Amanda Todd was anything insignificant, but like everything that from then till when her legislation came in place regarding that like what happened with her, like there's so many things that could have been prevented or slowed down and delayed, but they weren't. And it's like responsibility of the public to hold our politicians in place and with like not in place, but I mean like to hold them to what they say they're going to do, to hold them to their word. But then how much can the public really do? To what extent can the public keep pushing when we're so exhausted ourselves with everything that we get thrown, that everything that gets thrown our way, and the way we are trying to just like keep our heads above water, depending on what position you're in, I feel. But I feel like I lost my track.
No, you're
I need
you're
I
actually
need
on
to keep
track.
a
No.
I need to keep a notebook so I can
Yeah,
keep
just
what I
write
said.
things down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to find a piece of paper and I have so much piece of paper, but they have like things scribbled on it. So like I can't find a clean one.
Um Yeah, so like it is the responsibility of public. I think public opinion really holds a lot of weight, and without it, there, like we would could be in a very different place as we see now with many countries and events happening in the world.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's more important now than ever for people to come together and support the right thing. But
Yeah.
um, when we see this opposition from the people that are supposed to be placing these this legislation into place or speaking for us on our behalf in higher
Mhm.
spaces, and we don't see what we're pushing for, it can become
Mm-hmm.
disheartening. Um, and no wonder it discourages people, that's why, like, and then people don't speak up as much, or they don't pursue certain um advocacies as much, because you're already discouraged from seeing, okay, I did this for this and nothing came of it, so what's different now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then we kind of get stuck in a cycle, right?
Yeah. No, I agree with Neha and everything she said. Like the public push is so important. When we hear in media that the police isn't doing anything or the governing bodies aren't doing anything and there's like a public uproar, that is so important to have. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so many crimes where you hear about injustices, um, and the government or the policing body doing something wrong. And because there's a constant push for years and years and years and years, there's like an apology or fixing up or taking accountability that does happen. So the public push in certain ways is a positive thing, but there are negative effects to that. Um, yeah, positives comes with negatives. So yeah, that is in. I think it's important to have that push when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
the criminal justice system or just the justice system. When it comes to like true crime, sometimes that public push can be bad in certain ways. Like sleuthing is great. Sleuthing is
Yep.
the reason why like years and years of unsolved cases become solved, and or they come to light again with new theories or new openings in the case, which is great. But one of the things that sleuthing can go wrong is when, um, I think I talked about this a little bit in the first part, is when there's something ongoing, like a case ongoing, and theories are being presented on the news, then people start to point
Yeah.
fingers
Yeah.
and being like, it was definitely this person. It throws off the case. There's like this constant harassment to the person who might have not been just had anything to do with anything, and they were
Mm-hmm.
just thrown under the bus by the police for whatever reason. Those things do happen.
And then at that point, you taint the jury pool.
Yeah, you change the
Mm-hmm.
jury
Yeah.
pool. It just it taints things. So that is a thing. However, I will say it's kind of off topic, but it sometimes comes to the light on social media is that not every content creator, not every production needs to talk about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, certain podcasts will talk about everything, the justice system involved, the victims involved, the law, the policing, and everything. If that's the podcast that is what it's about, like if that's what they do. But I don't think every single podcast needs to do that. Like some people are uncomfortable talking about certain things, and it's okay for them not to talk about. Like I said, we're so lucky to have so many media platforms, so many podcasts about true crime that you don't need to rely on just one narrative. You can listen to another narrative if you want. If you're like, if there's sides to a case, you can be like, I'm going to listen to this podcast because they talk about this side,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to listen to another podcast because they talk to about a different side, and you can understand the whole story. So I agree that sometimes there's media, there's podcasts, there's news that don't talk about everything. So maybe they don't talk about the justice system, maybe they don't talk about the police injustices. But
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, they don't need to, because maybe whoever's telling the story, whoever is doing the research, they're not comfortable with it. But you have the ability yourself as a listener, or if that's something you're really passionate about, to Google it, to find that for yourself. So I don't necessarily blame a certain person for not presenting a story in a certain way.
That was beautifully put.
That was
Thank
so
you.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like I missed certain things, but okay.
We couldn't tell. We're just
uh,
absorbing it in.
yeah. Yeah, actually observing it so much, I'm actually blanking right now.
My bad. I think I went totally off topic with the last part, but like
No,
it's
she
something.
No.
like you totally tied true crime back in, man. I was the one that was off on the
No,
outside
you
of the
you had
circle.
like a justice system in there, so that still worked.
We
No,
went
but
out,
I
we came
think
back.
you really like you're like you hit the nail on the head by saying like not everyone has to talk about everything and not everyone has
Yeah.
to present everything the same way because then what's the point of having so many different people
Hmm.
presenting the same thing? Because when you're getting the same view over and over, like sometimes I'll listen to things that I don't agree with because it helps me try and understand where they're coming or I want to understand where how someone is looking at something. Even if I don't agree with it and I don't understand it, it doesn't mean like
Hmm.
I'm not going to listen to it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes just listening to what you don't agree with helps you better understand why you do agree with something or why you hold a certain stance on a certain
Hmm.
topic, I think.
Yeah. And sorry, okay,
Oh,
give me 1 second.
no, no.
Um, this one was about public misconceptions, right?
Yes, it was. And the effect of true crime podcasts on the public's understanding of like essentially how society works. Yeah.
Yes. So my last point, it was kind of like suggesting like I don't think like with podcasts not telling a portion of the story or an aspect is like to throw mis or like to lead
Yeah.
uh things off. It's just that I mean, like Nahani, I've been doing Nahani for like 2 years, a year and a half now. It's still not done. If podcasts were to go on, they would be on one story for like an entire year. I don't think a lot of people want to do that. It's not being disrespectful. It's just
Yeah.
people
There's
have limited time.
exactly. There's only so much time in a day to
Yeah.
do anything. So you can you do what you can,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
if someone wants to hear more, you can find somebody else that's talking about the same thing. You can also deep dive into the research as much as you want, as long as you're not lying about what happened.
Hmm.
That's a big thing, you know.
Yeah.
But if you're
Yeah.
highlighting, hey, this is a fault, this is something
Mhm.
that happened, and it's a fault in our society, that's a fair thing to bring up,
Oh, 100%. And
right?
you have
So,
that ability to like go online and complain about it, being like, hey, this happened. I'm not happy with it. Let's talk about it. Who I can reach out. That is actually a civic duty you should do as a
yeah,
Mm.
person, and to do your research you should do that, but to go to a celebrity's Twitter or like social media and being like, you didn't do this, you don't talk about this, you are not doing this, that's not a great approach, and I don't think you should hold someone else accountable for the things that they do publicly or say publicly. You should
yeah,
hold yourself accountable for that.
yeah. Which ties back to earlier today, just talking about like bias
Hmm.
and that coming from the audience. Okay, so we'll just finish up with the last point here. This should be pretty quick because we've kind of touched on this multiple times. But the last criticism is on overshadowing issues.
Hmm.
So like true crime podcasts may inadvertently overshadow significant societal issues related to crime, systemic injustice, poverty, mental health struggles. But this one I think is extremely subjective because it comes down to the tone and approach of each individual podcast. And like we said, like you just
Hmm.
said, um, you don't have to cover everything. There are some podcasts that will be very like black and white approach on right and wrong, what was right and wrong in this case, period,
Hmm.
and won't consider anything else. And then there are others that look at the gray, that look at the societal, financial, mental factors surrounding a case, where they're like, okay, there's a perpetrator, there's a victim, but with more context, we understand this was a victim perpetrating a crime on a victim. So
Hmm.
you get that extra level, but not everybody needs to necessarily do that, and that doesn't overshadow the issue. It doesn't get rid of the issue in society. It's just you cover what you can cover,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Mia, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was gonna say like the a major part of this is like no one can be objective, right? Because of the not only like the issues that influence every story, but also like the own lens that we look through it. Like what's our how many like intersections are we looking at something through? Like what do we how like how many do we have in front of us before we come to telling the story? And so everything is a little like there is bias in everything. There is a shift in everything. I think
Mhm.
when you try and tell a story objectively and you're aware, and the best way to do that is by being aware of like your own bias and kind of checking it first,
Yeah.
then that makes for a better storyteller and a better story being told, even if at the end of the day like you can't touch upon every single influencing factor. Like you can't like okay like we are a product of our environment, and if somebody grew up in a really shitty place, a really shitty household with super shitty abusive parents, or then when they grow up and they commit a certain crime or they behave a certain way or they react in a certain way, you kind of don't have high expectations of something else, or you already have that expectation that, yeah, this person is going to behave in a particular manner, right? Like you kind
Mhm.
of already put them in a box. And so when you're talking, and then you mentioned, like going back to one of our earlier questions about when storytellers discuss like the history of someone or how they grew up or where they grew up or these factors, then yeah, it helps you understand them, but it also, as long as you're not making that an excuse for their behavior or an excuse for what happened, right? I
Mhm.
think that's really important. But as I don't think I've come across a lot of like, maybe it's just the ones that I'm listening to at least, that really let it run wild and don't check their biases.
Mhm.
They mention it. They're like, like there's all these things that my audio just cut.
No, you're good.
No,
No,
all good.
I don't know, in my ears it just went really weird.
Oh, yeah, it's
Um,
a you problem, not the audio
it's a
problem.
problem. Anyways, that's it. It's really good to check your bias, and
Mhm.
or you don't think you will know how to do it, then ask someone who you think
Yeah.
might.
Yeah. Like I said, there's so many podcasts. You can't rely on single one for one information. I was
Hmm.
listening to one, and I actually didn't realize about this podcast, but they had very little stories about crimes against children. And in one of the episodes, they actually did. It was more of like a later teen, but they actually admitted that they didn't like talking about crimes against children, not because they're like this is something that doesn't happen or they don't believe in it. It's just like they have children, they just don't want to talk about it. And I
Hmm.
think sometimes we realize, like, as whether it be celebrities, podcast hosts, whatever it may be, there's people that are generally uncomfortable talking to the entire world about certain topics. And as listeners, as people who receive entertainment, we need to be a little bit more respectful of that.
Yeah,
But
like realize that the person is also a person,
yeah,
who you're listening to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, but like, hey, listen, like, if one podcast doesn't cover one a news outlet or one person doesn't cover something, just listen to another one. It's uh it's not gonna hurt you. You might waste a little bit of time, but hey,
It
somebody's
is
talking about it.
it is like a bit of our responsibility, I think, like if you want to be like if you're choosing to learn about what's happening in the world, or you're choosing to inform yourself, you have a responsibility to, I think, seek out
Hmm.
a handful of sources, not just one source,
Yeah.
right? If you want to be well informed or you want to learn about what's happening, like that comes with knowing that one point of view, one perspective is not going to be enough. It's not it.
Hmm.
You're not going to learn to get everything. Um, but so many people shed themselves of that responsibility,
Hmm.
you know?
Listen to 5 podcasts that talk about the same thing and
Yeah.
then make a judgment. How about that?
And make sure one of those is us.
Is us.
Actually,
Is
make
us.
sure two of those listenings are us, and then the other three you can do whatever you want.
Um, I also wanted to include, like, there's the uncomfortable. relatability aspect, but also the aspect that certain podcasts are the host might be passionate about something specific, like mental
Yeah.
health, for example. So that is their focus. Um, that's what they like to talk about. So maybe they're gonna focus on that bit a little bit more. It's not that they're trying to overshadow other things. It's just that's what they're better at doing. And I think um, when you're passionate about something, obviously you're going to be a little bit more detailed in
Hmm.
talking about those matters, sharing those matters, than you are with matters that you're not quite sure or not really comfortable with how to research that. So there's
Exactly.
that.
And that makes a lot of sense. Talk about what you know, like what you can know about. Try to give as much information as you can, and I think most podcasts try to do this. So, alrighty. So I guess in conclusion, um, many of these criticisms are pretty valid, as
Mhm.
we've seen, but we kind of agree that with context, there's many more positives, and with a bit of care and presentation, true crime podcasts can be quite useful and overall good for the public.
Mhm.
But again, this is coming from the guy on a true crime podcast, so
We're going to
yeah,
be a little bit biased,
just a tad.
just a tad.
We kind of like doing this, so
Yeah,
um,
this is our therapy.
this is our therapy. Yeah.
Publicized therapy sessions.
Go to
um,
therapy.
but just to put it out there, we are open to other points of view. Perhaps it's something we haven't considered. And if anyone listening kind of wants to join in the conversation, would like to further explore this topic, wants us to do it, let us know in the comments, let us know by email, by carrier pigeon, something. And yeah, we can continue this conversation. Probably do like a full episode, honestly, or two more even on this. But yeah, does anyone have anything else to add?
If you're listening this on Apple Podcasts, please send me a DM.
Yeah.
on
As
We
the on the official podcast account, okay?
Yes, because okay, somebody is, but we're not on Apple Podcast.
at the time of this recording, we are not,
On
but we
Apple
can see
Podcast.
somebody is listening. So
And we don't know how because there's no link to our Apple Podcast, so I don't know how it's coming back to me that someone's listening to Apple Podcast or this on Apple Podcast. So if you are, send me a DM and what year you are in, the date
Thank
you're listening to this to.
thank you for listening though. Like we appreciate the like the passion and the
The
commitment
passion, yeah, we really appreciate it, no
to
matter where
our
you're
pod.
from. Yeah,
oh,
what
You didn't
oh
do
light year
man,
you're in?
anything you didn't do anything
No,
wrong. You're in the right, babes. Don't worry, okay?
I was just listening from the future.
someone's really confused, being like, "What is happening?"
Oh my goodness. Or they're just like, whoa, they're talking to me specifically.
Yeah,
Oh my
We
gosh.
know you're
Okay.
out there and we love you.
we love you. A lot of kisses and hugs.
Uh,
XOXO.
We're all sick.
alrighty. Well, thanks for your time, y'all. Neha, Ipsha, and everybody who's
Yeah.
listening.
Yes.
And I hope you enjoyed our little chat today and
Hmm.
will join us at the round table next week. Again, if you liked what you heard, want to hear more, please take some time, comment, like, subscribe, all the fun stuff. And we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.